President Trump is taking matters into his own hands and taking down two of President Obama's main achievements.
He announced his plan to rein in Obamacare, and today he announced that he will not recertify the Iran nuclear deal. KCON9 political reporter Dave Bryan is here now with all the details as we head into the weekend. Dave?
And these certainly were two of the real pillars, I think, of the Obama administration. Today, President Trump refusing to give the Iran nuclear deal his stamp of approval. That comes just one day after the president put Obamacare in the crosshairs, cutting off billions of dollars in subsidies. But first, the president's scathing review of the Iran deal, one of President Obama's most important foreign policy agreements.
We will not continue down a path whose predictable conclusion is more violence, more terror, and the very real threat of Iran's nuclear breakout.
Turning his campaign rhetoric into reality, President Trump lowered the boom on President Obama's most controversial achievements, Obamacare and the Iran nuclear agreement. He accused Iran of violating the deal.
The Iranian regime has committed multiple violations of the agreement.
As a result, President Trump decertified the Iran deal and unilaterally imposed new sanctions on Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which the White House charges is a sponsor of international terrorism, and places new sanctions on Iran's ballistic missile program. But he did not fully withdraw from the agreement, as some members of his own administration feared he might do. Instead, he kicked the issue to Congress and demanded new terms be set to satisfy his complaints with Iran by reinstituting new sanctions on the Iran nuclear program. And if he doesn't get what he wants, the president said he might tear up the agreement and walk away.
Well, I may do that. The deal is terrible. We'll have Congress take a look at it, and I may very well do that.
The Iran deal was the signature foreign policy achievement of the Obama administration and was designed to limit Iran's nuclear activities and development in return for lifting economic sanctions against Iran. The nuclear agreement was signed not only by the U.S. and Iran, but by 5 other countries as well in 2015. Only the U.S. is now considering walking away. All the other signatory countries say the agreement is working, and so, for that matter, do some members of the president's own cabinet.
My view on the nuclear deal is they are in technical compliance of the nuclear arrangement.
The Secretary of State worked with Defense Secretary James Mattis and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joseph Dunford. They put together a compromise on the Iran agreement, which the president announced Friday instead of a full-blown pullout by the U.S.
I do believe the agreement to date has delayed the development of a nuclear capability by Iran.
Democrats charge the president is making a big mistake.
The Iran nuclear agreement was the best way to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear-armed state. President Trump's refusal to recertify is a grave mistake.
But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is cheering on the president.
I congratulate President Trump for his courageous decision today. He boldly confronted Iran's terrorist regime.
Then there's the dismantling of Obamacare, which began Thursday when the president issued an executive order and announced he would be stopping federal funding subsidies for Affordable Care Act enrollees.
Let Obamacare fail.
The attack on President Obama's signature domestic law includes the elimination of $7 billion in those subsidy payments to insurers, funding that helped bring down premiums for more than 6 million low-income Americans. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated that ending these subsidies will push up premiums by about 20% in 2018.
We are moving toward lower costs and more options in the health care market.
But State Attorney General Javier Becerra announced on Friday that California and 17 other states have filed a lawsuit in San Francisco, challenging the constitutionality of the subsidy rollback.
The dismantling of the Affordable Care Act is real and it's costly, and places like California are saying we're not going to take that because it's too important for our families that work very hard to know that they can access good health insurance, regardless of what Donald Trump says. Watch what he does.
Well, as we reported last night, the potential impact on covered California health care customers will be less than for families in some other states. That's because Covered California, anticipating this could happen, reached an agreement with the insurers just in case, and it's expected to protect customers from huge price increases. Jeff, Lena, back to you.